have a really cool, but technically sound like extremely dry session, which is called Domestic Policy Drivers Supporting Green Shipping Fuel. So it's not this global thing, gets really detailed on shipping, but for me, this is like the key issue of the future. I would like to, we have a mixed crowd, so we have some people from, I'll introduce them as we go along. We have some people from the developing business, we have shipbuilders here, but you have somebody also from the ship traders here. And so it's great to have like different roles, and so I will try to challenge the panel and to bring out the differences of the different positions in the industry across for the interest of the audience, so just to warn the panel. So I will start off with the developer, Devesh. So we spoke about it, you are probably one of the very few chemical engineers here in the audience. You've actually managed a 6,000 ton a day ammonia plant. So those who don't know it, that is probably the top of the scale of ammonia production that you can get. You're now with Welspun New Energy. So why are you interested, and why is your company interested in shipping? And what do you think you need, or does the company think it needs in terms of policy to make green energy and shipping work?
So thank you, Rolf, for having me here and introducing about 6,000 ton per day of. It was a conventional ammonia plant based on natural gases. India is one of the largest ammonia plant in India and contributes about 10% of the total ammonia generation in India. So right now in Welspun, we are going to develop 1 million ton of green ammonia in phased manner at Kandla port. This green shipping is a very interesting topic for us because this IMO regulations, which keeps that by 2050, this emissions, shipping emissions should be zero. So the only way to do this by regulations and policies, which can be done either by using alternative fuels like green methanol, green ammonia, and we are in that field. Right now, shipping industry contributes around 3% of the total CO2 emissions, and ammonia industry is around 1.8% of total CO2 emissions. So approx 5% emissions are related to this field. If we are producing ammonia and using it as green fuels for shipping industry, then we can achieve these targets to this. And another challenge for green fuel developers like RFNBO, we have limitations on GHG emissions. It is 3.4, but its boundaries are for well to gray. In India, it's well to get for 2 kg, but for RFNBO, if you have to supply your ammonia or green methanol in Europe, then you have to consider this production, supply chain, as well as end-use emissions. So this supply chain emissions can only be done if you use the vessels which is being run on this green fuels or low carbon emitting fuels. So based on this, the only things which can be done using this to minimize the emissions. That's why we are more interested to supply the vessel owners these green fuels, as well as to transport our green fuels on green fuels. Otherwise, it would be like we are using our electric vehicles charging with diesel generator. If we use
Good. Okay, that means, like from your point, one of the problems is a lack of standards. Are we going well to wake? Are we going tank to wake? Are these things? So how do we define it? Of course, and second, we need then more standards. Really, what are the numbers? Perhaps just an intervention from my side. Why am I so enthusiastic about green fuels and shipping? DNV came off with like 2 key numbers. Global shipping today uses 3% of energy, but in order to achieve the objectives as set up by the International Maritime Organization, it would need 30% of all green fuels announced projects, not even implemented. And a lot of those announced won't even be done. There's huge gaps, so shipping industry needs massive amounts really of green fuels actually to decarbonize. And that's why there's, for me, such potential. Let me now go to Loftur. Loftur Thorarinsson, so I got it right. We discussed it previously, so Loftur has been forever in Asia. He spent 15 years in Japan. I didn't ask if you speak Japanese. But Loftur is, the name says everything. He's Icelandic. So if you don't know, Iceland is a country of 330,000 people, but is well positioned, especially in world football. I went actually to see a match of Iceland against Argentina. But he's going to tell us really hopefully more about why he represents MOL, which is Mitsui Shipping Line, and they recently concluded agreement with Cmdre to produce, I think, 9 ammonia tankers. So I think I would like to hear more. So, like, you're really going all in, 9 tankers at once. Tell us more why you chose ammonia, and why you, as a ML, is a ship owner, I believe, and ship manager. So why you choose going ammonia as your shipping route?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. So the name MOL is Mitsui OSK Lines, and we just abbreviate it as MOL. You mentioned, was in Japan for about 15 years before India. Been here for a while, and fortunately managed to pick up the language in 15 years. You usually should be able to do that in that period of time. So MOL, we are a Japan headquartered shipping company, second largest shipping company in the world in terms of the number of vessels that we own and operate. We have around between 800 and 900 vessels today that we own and operate, and we have a policy in place, target in place to decarbonize by 2050. The reason why we are, very, I would say, bullish on ammonia is based on, global trends, but also analysis that we've been doing in-house. So we've been essentially backcasting what we need to do to reach the decarbonization targets that we have. And we started off, looking at relatively boring but important things like energy efficiency, how can we run the vessels in a more efficient way, and so on and so forth. But once we go into the details, we don't see many fuel options out there available in the world that has the same properties as ammonia. And what I mean with that is that you have a non-carbon-based fuel that can also be produced at pretty many places in the world. Like ammonia, green ammonia for that matter, can be produced, of course, very competitively here in India, and also Middle East and other regions in the world. If you compare that with methanol, you will have, at the end of the day, you will have, some issues with getting biogenic CO2 and so on and so forth, and there will be issues with that that you don't face with ammonia. So that's, the availability of the fuel, future availability of the fuel makes it very attractive. And then secondly, the previous session was about safety and so on and so forth. We are quite, confident that the safety issues regarding ammonia will be overcome. Companies that are working on ammonia-fueled vessels right now on engines like MAN and others, these are very professional companies. So we're confident there. And to your last point, we have been going a little bit all in recently. We ordered, I think, 9 vessels, seven a couple of weeks ago that are biofuel ammonia vessels. One of the reasons why we're ordering such vessels, of course, we believe in ammonia, but the companies that we work for, they don't want to place orders today for fuel oil vessels, because the risk is that these vessels will lose their value after, let's say, 15 years. So there's a policy risk as well. So that's why more and more companies, our customers, want to have the option of having vessels that will run on ammonia. And then finally, those are the kind of key points related to that.
Okay, thank you. Let me pass on then to Commander Jaikumar Raghunathan. We have 2 people from the Navy today, so you're one of the 2. If I pass the word to you, because of your background, you're a shipbuilding engineer, and so I've spent a lot of time in the Navy, actually, as I understand, in shipbuilding. So I suppose some secrets. I'm not sure if you got into submarine building or not, probably not, but anyway, you have a great understanding of the technical aspects, really, of fuels and ships, and probably more than anybody else of us. And therefore, the question to you is therefore, ammonia and shipping, does that work? And is that safe? Does it make sense? Do you agree with Loftur that's the fuel of the future?
Everything is safe as long as you follow whatever is required to be followed.
Okay.
That's how
Maybe
I start.
the order, sir. You just do procedure,
because
sir. Yes.
my colleague here and I are used to working in reasonably hazardous environment most of the time. But if you follow the safety protocols, any place can be made reasonably safe. Follow the safety protocols, double underlined. That is the. So having, is it a viable fuel? Definitely. What can be done? There is something that you can do in the design, in the sense in terms of designing the vessel itself, how you build containment tanks, double hulled vessels. It is an engineering problem. Largely the safety standards, there was talk of, there is no standard that has evolved. All the classification societies are currently evolving standards for design of vessels which will meet the fundamental safety requirements for both carrying ammonia as a cargo and using ammonia as a fuel on vessels. The typical engineering challenges, one is the design of the tanks itself. The second is the design of the pipelines. You need very, very good material which is not going to get embrittled when being exposed to ammonia. One of the biggest challenges that we face in the Navy is there is no space in a ship. Particularly if you're trying to use fuel, the amount of fuel, space available for fuel is very limited. So optimizing the way you're carrying your fuel becomes a very big design challenge. So in that context, to be able to, you are going to compress it and use it. And then whether it's ammonia or hydrogen, the challenge is the same because the volume that it occupies in normal course is very high. So how do you compress it and use it? The other challenges are related to the piping systems. Not too many people realize how difficult a problem it can be because normally most of the piping systems on ships are flanged. You cannot have the risk of flanged piping systems in vessels which are going to be either carrying ammonia or using ammonia as a fuel. There are the risks of leakage. So therefore, to contain it, you need to develop very, very special technology for it, which is like welded joints and seamless joints and stuff like that. Very high level of quality checks and testing before these pipes are actually installed. It goes through so these are all the design aspects. The second is the management aspect, which is largely the ventilation and detection systems. In terms of ventilation systems, you cannot design the ship like a normal ship. You need to have very, very special principles for designing the ventilation system in case of a leak. First step, of course, is detection. We have some power electronics and electronics people who are sitting here at or in the morning. This requires a very high end of very early detectability. So you need to have very, very high-end sensors which are going to be picking this leak up at the earliest stage so that you're able to manage it. And of course, then the ventilation systems come into play. There are washdown systems which can be designed specifically for the effects of ammonia not spreading. And of course, the last step is safety standards and general standards for implementation. I'm sure IMO is already at work in terms of safety of life at sea for ammonia carrying vessels. It's a matter of time, I think these regulations are going to come out. And of course, the DNV rules and the Lloyd rules are all coming to ensure that that highest level of safety is maintained. All of this will only fall in place if the crew is trained. Crew is to be trained. Yeah. And trained very specifically because dealing with ammonia is a very different kind of a challenge. Having said that, all of these challenges are actually opportunities. Opportunities for the manufacturing ecosystem in any country because it's not a question of if anymore. Given the IMO mandate, we have to convert to hydrogen and ammonia. These vessels are coming. Our good friend just placed order for 7 more. There are more coming. So now it's a question of when, how fast can we do it? So in that context, we have to look at it as opportunities for the industry at large to not just help in developing standards, but also developing in designs and systems which will make it significantly more safer and also far more efficient in terms of usage. I hope, it was a longish answer.
Brilliant. I'm very happy.
I was, after having been a consultant for 6 years, I had to don my hat of an engineer ship designer after a long time, but it was fun.
No, that's great fun. So I'm also an engineer by background, so you've solved a problem for me. What's like a ship is just moving and bouncing in waves all the time. So screws will give way at some point under pressure. But you answer the question. Of course, you can flange. You have to solder to make sure these are seamless connections, and there's more things. And you repeated also the issue of ventilation, which Mortaz also addressed too. Let me pass on to Commodore G. I'm very happy to have you. I'm going to have to ask you a very tricky question, unfortunately, because you're also the advisor for TERI on shipping. So if I go to the TERI website, the green shipping, TERI is only about land power. Their initiatives are land power and just-in-time arrival. So in terms of the pyramid of greening shipping, operational efficiency is like the very easiest. Then you come to energy efficiency. And then when we talk about green fuels, that's why we're talking about it, it's like the top of the pyramid. So what are your views on green fuels in green shipping? And how can we get TERI to engage more in green fuels?
So I must thank you, Rolf G. Having said that, allow me to give you a little different perspective, apart from admitting to the fact that the TERI website probably needs to be updated. Well, in February, I'm sure many from this audience would have been present at the Green Shipping Conclave in Mumbai, wherein the Secretary General of the IMO was present. And he made a very candid admission. Today, Arjun was kind enough to share the Lloyd's summary of the intersessional working group prior to the MEPC, the Marine Environment Protection Committee 83rd meeting, which is scheduled from the 7th to the 11th. The main focus there is going to come to a consensus onto what is the exact way ahead for fuels as part of the revised strategy midterm of the IMO. What I mentioned the Secretary General is the fact that he made a candid confession. He said that the entire industry at this point in time is not very clear as to what is going to be the pathway. There are many pathways, but what is it that is going to take us into 2050 and beyond? The probable pathway as it looks now is at this moment in time probably a mix of LNG, LPG, methanol to be followed by ammonia. As he seconds it, they're already placing orders, because if you look 15 years down the line, and I'm sure everybody's aware that when you design ships, you're looking at a minimum time span of about 25 years, nothing less than that. So you can't, and retrofitting a ship engine is not something which you buy off the shelf and put it there. It's a finite amount of downtime for that ship, and this downtime is in months. So there are many factors involved. But coming to the point, so it's ammonia and then probably hydrogen thereafter. That's the mixed bag. But I must also caution this audience that whilst we have all been focused on to decarbonization, the IMO is actually looking at CO2 equivalent. When you talk CO2 equivalent, it is a mix of carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane.
Yes.
Now, when you look at LNG and LPG, methane slip is a factor which technology is addressing, but we are still some distance away. And methane slip is about close to 28 times more harmful than CO2. Now, if you're looking at carbon, carbon being not there in ammonia, nitrous oxide,
Yes.
close to about 280 times more harmful than CO2. So these are factors, whilst we are all focused on decarbonization and we are all thinking carbon in the hydrocarbon, it's not that. We need to be mindful, it's a basket, in which there are these three main players. So this is just a word of caution. So first of all, we will upgrade the TERI website. Just in time is being focused on because, as you rightly point out, it's low-hanging fruit, doable easily in the present context. Shore power systems, that is supplying shore power to ships so that they cut down on their engine running hours whilst the ship is berthed alongside, so that they reduce their carbon dioxide and other emissions. That is a little distance away because the IMO is yet to come out with guidelines for ships to have those power supply receiving facilities, because power supply voltages and frequencies are not the same all over the world. It varies from 230 to 660, 440 volts is also thrown in, 415 is thrown in, there's 50 hertz cycle, there's 60 hertz cycle. Transformers are easily available, voltage transformers and frequency converters and voltage, they're all easily available, but it all adds up to what the infrastructure needs to be created on the jetty where the ship is going to come in. And it adds or rather it obstructs movement of certain things on the jetty. You know, for example, if you have to lay a power cable from a distribution point to a ship, and if you have a track-laid crane, that crane can't move. It's held up on either side of the cable. These are all practical problems. And I speak from 10 years of experience as a chief engineer and completely 38 years in the Navy. So when you have to move a crane, it's a challenge. If you have a shore supply cable running across the jetty. Of course, these days you can have, galleries going below the jetty surface, and all that can be worked out. There are all solutions are available. It's not that they can't be solved. But so shore power supply is something else. But insofar as TERI is concerned, there are two groups. Allow me to state that there are two groups presently working in TERI. One on biofuels. We are in close discussion with shipping companies, including Mr. Naik's, and on the use of biofuel. And there is another group which is working on methanol, ammonia, and hydrogen. So it's not that they're not working on. We are seized of the problem, and we are working on it.
Good. Okay, so great to hear that. It's just the website that needs to be updated. You mentioned IMO. So we were supposed to have here a representative for the Ministry of Ports here today. Probably got called to the minister at the last moment and therefore couldn't attend. What I would like to share with you, since Debesh mentioned the IMO, the deliberations. For those probably not involved in shipping, they're not aware that IMO has made great commitments to decarbonize the entire industry, which is great because one of the challenges I as a European am facing is it's nice for Europe to set standards, but the rest of the world doesn't follow. Europe has the cost and nobody else cares. IMO, as a global agency, can set standards globally for everybody to follow. That makes it so important. They have an annual meeting in October where they will review and approve the strategy for decarbonization. There is a working group meeting next week, which will set, they're debating technical standards and economic incentives. And there was a technical committee meeting this week to debate, and there was huge divide between the smaller island countries saying we want a strong levy to punish those who pollute, and we need to be compensated for it because we're small. And the big countries, as India and China, saying, no, we want just carbon trading. We don't want to have a levy. To India's credit, and that's why I was hoping that someone would come, actually a wonderful compromise emerged that will probably lead to shipping being actually the leading user and demand, or off-taker as it were, for green fuels. And that is the introduction of a double band system, which means you have a higher band, and this is all in terms of CO2 equivalent emissions, CO2 equivalent emissions per ship and whatever, a higher band above which people pay a very high fine for being polluters, a second lower band under which they are scot-free because then they achieve it, and then a medium band where they just pay, let's say, a smaller levy, perhaps 1/3, 1/4 of the higher band. But in both cases, these are levies that will be imposed. There will be a huge amount of data that needs to be required. But what it will do is definitely incentivize the entire shipping industry, therefore, because they now will be forced to really be much more serious about their decarbonization efforts. And if I go back to my 3 and 30% analogy at the beginning, there's going to be huge pressure around the world really for green shipping fuels. And this was the update I need to give, why IMO and why it's so important. But let me pass on, so if somebody wants to add on.
KPMG India is currently advising the Ministry of Shipping, Ports and Waterways for evolving policy. How do you support Indian-owned, Indian-built vessels, particularly towards encouraging ship owners to own ammonia and hydrogen fuel vessels? So in that regard, we're working with the policy. It was announced in the budget. One thing is becoming very clear. If you are in the business of green hydrogen or ammonia, production is going to be a business, but shipping is also going to be a business because you don't have a choice in that regard. So given that fact that it is something that is going to be embraced, the government is very well seized of this. What they have come up with is a lot of support measures, since you asked about policy, to support green ships that are built in India. There is something called the Shipbuilding Financial Assistance Policy. So if you are going to build a vessel, there are different bands of financial assistance that the government is going to give. And for vessels which are green fueled, typically hydrogen fueled or ammonia fueled or methanol or ethanol, that has got the highest financial assistance. Something close to 25% of the cost of the vessel will be given by the government of India.
That's significant.
So that's one part. Additionally, one of the biggest problems that ship owners face is they don't get capital. Nobody gives them loan. So there is another scheme which has come out called the Maritime Development Fund. So the government has created a fund which will make capital available to anybody who wants to build a ship in India, particularly green vessels, to the extent that, either in a debt form or an equity form, that kind of capital is going to be available. Something that was not available to Indian ship owners before is going to be made available. In addition, there has been a conscious effort to create capacity and capability for building these kind of vessels in India, so that Indian companies, and I was just talking to Arjun before, if you're in the business of green fuels, becoming a green ship owner is going to be inevitable, at least in the short to medium term. You have to get into it. Given the fact that you have to get into it, the government is making lots of conscious efforts to build this ecosystem where it makes it possible for green energy companies to be able to buy these ships easily or afford the ships easily, being built in India, and also leveraging all the kind of policies that are going to be coming out.
No, I just wanted to clarify on one point that you made about, Europe making the standards and other countries not following it. And since you made a specific reference of India and China, of course, acknowledging the proposal that India has put forth, to set the record straight, if you look at climate change negotiations, I'm sure you are aware that today, US, if you look at per capita emissions, US leads at about 14. China is at about 8.5. Europe is somewhere around 7 to 8. And India is at 2.5 to 3, in that range. The world average is 4.5. So, apart from the fact that I'm discounting the fact that historical emissions, if you get into, it's a completely different debate as to who has contributed to why the world is where it is today. But if you look at the last, say, 40 years or so, whilst India has contributed very little in terms of per capita, yet the kind of commitments that India has made in terms of its NDCs to the Conference of Parties is, I think, something which needs to be acknowledged, so that this is just to set the record straight.
Okay, we're getting into climate policy, global policy, and who's who and who blames. So what I wanted to point out is that in the entire decarbonization issues in the COP, one of the challenges we face, who bears the burden? Europe, as you said, I think has done more than other countries. We've greatly decreased our curve. For me, it's where I think in Germany more at 5 actually much lower. The issue is simply that as the first mover, you bear the cost. And so, yes, somebody said this early this morning, there are huge opportunities, but for us it's the cost, so our exporters are suffering as a result. And just to make it clear, so we're doing a bit, and yet we're having problems actually because CBAM forces people to change to expensive processes, which makes them uncompetitive as they export. So there's also, just for the record, but we agree. So I think that's the nice thing about this, and about this, let's say, consensus that has emerged. It still needs to be confirmed, but for me, I wanted to highlight not the point that Europe is being blah, 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 leave that aside. My point was that for the first time, we're getting now in one sector a globally accepted way to decarbonize and for everybody to hear. And I think that's for me really absolutely a way forward. And it still needs to be approved. We still have to wait until October to go through whatever deliberations to finally get approved. So it's just a sign of hope, but it's not clear yet. One question. So we've talked a lot about technical issues. I'm not a shipping person, but you're much more into the trading shipping routes. We heard this morning that India is really hoping to be a green hub for green fuels. We've heard also that now that the challenge, however, with green fuels is that it increases the amount of tank storage needed, which reduces the amount of space left. I also know that most ship owners or cargo owners, they want the goods quickly as possible. And so usually they bunker in Singapore and then they bunker again in Rotterdam when they offload. So does India have a chance, from your perspective, in becoming a bunkering hub, or will ships just continue to pass through on the way to Europe or to the Pacific?
Yeah, on this one, like in terms of ammonia at least, and in the short term, we see Singapore, Singapore, Rotterdam, Middle East, these are the areas where bunkering trials are going forward and actual progress is being made. But what happens when you use ammonia as a fuel, and this was pointed out before, is that you need more fuel in terms of volume. So you can solve this in two ways. You can, take more space on the vessel or on the ship up for fuel, or you can bunker more. So in case of you bunkering more, if you're going from, let's say, the Far East, Japan to Europe, instead of just bunkering in Singapore, you would, for example, stop by somewhere in Tamil Nadu or somewhere in the south part of India on your way and bunker there. So this kind of route, just from a logistics point of view, would work as well. And then as well, there's a lot of traffic coming in and out of Gujarat and out of Maharashtra as well. So that part of India is important as well. But what is also important to remember regarding bunkering, it's not only a question of putting up some tanks and some bunkering vessels. There is a whole lot of infrastructure around it. So there's a reason why Singapore is competitive, why Hong Kong is competitive, and Fujairah and so on, because they have all sorts of other facilities as well. So India has a lot of potential here, but what India should maybe do, in my personal view, instead of trying to have like 3 points bunkering places or 4 or whatever the policymakers are talking about, which is due to domestic politics sometimes, try to narrow down to 1 or 2 points and focus energy a little bit, be more competitive in one place rather than trying to capture 3 places at 3 ports at the same time.
And I would say thank you very much, gentlemen. We've made them very short, very efficient. I would like in this stage to highlight, let's say, these intense discussions. We are also intending to set up a green ports and shipping network, simply for the reason of why you saw here today, is that developers, the ship owners, and the shipping industry is actually a very complex ecosystem, and for most part, my perception is they need to talk more to another to make it work. We've heard the issues really on safety, so it's great to hear that actually that Commander Jaikumar knows these things so much better than I do, but also Commodore Debesh is actually supporting everything in this way. So it would be great actually for developers and shipping industry to actually talk more. And for this regard, if you ever get the invite, then you know where it's coming from and why it's useful, and that you see that actually there's great chance for offtake in the shipping industry to come. With this, sorry, and I forgot, Debesh, I forgot you.
Rolf, I think it's good to do this networking, because right now India is only ammonia importing country. We are not exporting ammonia. So it's a totally different, totally new for us to develop this export facilities. And we have a clusters of ports like Paradeep, Gopalpur, Idir, Kandla. We have to develop a common infrastructure so that all the developers can use that infrastructure, because this requires huge capex as well as technology innovations, safety aspects also. So because of these things, I think it will be better if we can, this type of collaboration can be done as for technology as well for export purpose.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. And that just only emphasized the need for the collaboration with this. A big hand for the panelists, please.